The fluorescent lights above the bank counter buzzed like they were laughing at me before Daniel even opened his mouth. I stood there with my ID in hand, quietly asking the teller if I could withdraw just $100, my voice barely louder than a breath. I felt small, tired, and invisible, until he appeared beside me like a storm I didn't ask for. Daniel leaned his elbow on the counter, his cologne sharp, his grin even sharper. $100, Romana, he said loudly, almost theatrically. Seriously? You're scraping that low now? A few heads turned. Some pretended not to listen, but their eyes flicked over with thin curiosity. The teller froze. My fingers tightened around my ID, knuckles whitening, but I forced myself to stay still. Daniel loved an audience, and he got louder when he sensed silence. Did your little projects fail again? He continued in that fake soft voice he used when he wanted to seem concerned but actually wanted to break me in half. You know, you could just ask Mom for cash. She's used to bailing you out. The words cut deeper because he knew they weren't true. He knew I hadn't asked anyone for help in years. He knew exactly what he was clawing at. But he was enjoying himself too much to stop. He let out a long, exaggerated sigh. God, Romana, you're 30 and begging for $100. Imagine being that pathetic. His laughter echoed, bouncing off the marble floor, bleeding into the silence of the queue. I kept my face calm. It was the only shield I had left. I stared straight ahead, my pulse steady even as heat crawled up my neck. I could feel the humiliation sitting on my skin like dust. Fine, invisible, but choking. The teller cleared her throat. Would you still like? Actually, Daniel cut in, tapping my shoulder, maybe don't give it to her. She needs a financial guardian. Or therapy. Or both. More laughter. Not from me. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I didn't give him the satisfaction of reacting. My silence unnerved him for half a second. I saw it flicker, but he masked it with another smirk. He thought I was powerless because I wasn't fighting back. He mistook quiet for weak. He mistook calm for broke. He mistook me. I breathed in slowly, feeling the cold air slide down my throat like a warning bell. Are you done? I asked softly, almost too gently. It made him scoff. Yeah, I'm done, he said. Just don't embarrass yourself further. Let's go, Romana. But I didn't move. I stepped closer to the counter, lowering my voice. I'd like to make a withdrawal, I said. My tone didn't change, but the air around me did. It thickened. Shifted. The teller sensed it before Daniel did. How much? She asked. I slid a different card across the desk, the one Daniel had never seen, the one I never spoke about, the one that did not belong to the life he mocked. I watched Daniel roll his eyes, preparing another joke. I watched his jaw lock when the system beeped. I watched his pupils tighten when the teller's face went pale. I watched confidence slip off him like a loose thread. And I leaned in, my voice colder than marble. Not $100, I whispered. His smirk vanished. The teller swallowed. You're requesting a withdrawal of... I nodded once. 3.8 billion. Daniel's lips parted, soundless. And in that crack of stunned silence, I let the hook hang between us like a guillotine. He didn't know who he was talking to. The shock on Daniel's face in that bank didn't come from the number on the screen. It came from something older, something he didn't think I remembered, something he assumed I'd buried under years of silence. But the truth is, moments like that $100 humiliation cut so deep because they were built on a childhood full of smaller cuts, each one sharp, each one carved by Daniel's hands. Growing up with Daniel felt like living in the shadow of a monument built by someone else. He was the golden child, the boy who could do no wrong, the one whose laughter filled the house like warm sunlight. And me? I was the quiet one. The girl who blended into the walls. The one who learned to lower her voice before anyone ever told her to. My name was always said softer than his, as if I might break if addressed too loudly. I still remember standing on the carpet of our living room, 7 years old, holding up a painting I'd spent days working on. My fingers were stained with acrylics, my heart pounding with the kind of hope only children feel. I wanted Mom to see me, for once, to really look. But the moment Daniel walked in with a new trophy from his school competition, the painting in my hands became invisible. The praise shifted instantly, like a spotlight dragged across a stage. I was left standing there, my painting suddenly feeling childish, silly, unnecessary. That was the pattern. Daniel spoke, and the room listened. Daniel complained, and the world bent around him. Daniel wanted, and he received. I learned early that if we both reached for something at the same time, I'd be the one who ended up empty-handed. It wasn't that he tried to hurt me back then. Not at first. It was the way everyone else rewarded him for stepping on me that turned stepping into stomping. Small moments became habits. Habits became personality. And eventually, cruelty became his language. He teased me for being quiet. He mocked me for being sensitive. He told people I cried easily, even when I didn't. The worst part wasn't the teasing. It was how everyone laughed along with him. How his jokes about me became family entertainment. How I started shrinking without even realizing it. So when he mocked me at the bank, it wasn't a new wound, it was a reopened one. Standing there, with people watching, his voice echoing, his grin wide and careless. It transported me back to all those childhood moments where I held something fragile, hope, dignity, pride, and he crushed it without hesitation. And of course he thought asking for $100 was pathetic. To him, I'd always been the one who needed help, who wasn't strong enough, loud enough, bright enough. He couldn't imagine me standing on my own, let alone standing above him. To him, my worth had always been measured against his achievements. And he made sure I knew my score. The irony was that he had no idea who I had become. He never asked, never bothered to look past the version of me he'd created in his mind. The invisible girl. The quiet shadow. The one whose victories didn't matter because they weren't his. He didn't know how many nights I stayed awake building something of my own. He didn't know how many times I stitched myself back together after being torn down. By him, by our parents, by the weight of always being less. He didn't know that silence wasn't my weakness. Silence was where I rebuilt. So when he laughed in that bank, loud and proud and cruel, something inside me didn't break. Something aligned. Because for the first time in my life, I had the power to show him the truth he never saw coming. The invisible girl was never weak. She was simply waiting. And as the teller looked from me to the screen and then to him, pale and trembling, I felt something shift inside my chest, a quiet certainty rising from old wounds. He had spent a lifetime stepping on me, but he was about to learn what it felt like when the ground moved beneath him. People like Daniel always saw my silence as emptiness. But silence, for me, was the sound of calculation, of years spent studying patterns, understanding systems, and building something no one in my family even imagined I was capable of. While Daniel grew louder with every compliment he received, I grew sharper in the spaces where nobody bothered to look. My hidden life didn't start with money. It started with curiosity. Numbers spoke to me the way emotions spoke to other people. I could see structure in chaos, movement in stillness. Even as a teenager, I understood cash flow the way Daniel understood attention. Instinctively, effortlessly. But in our home, intelligence wasn't valued unless it came from him. So I learned to keep mine quiet. After school, while Daniel wasted time bragging about meaningless victories, I was in libraries, reading everything I could about markets, data, psychology, and systems engineering. I never told anyone, not because I was ashamed, but because I learned early, knowledge grows best in silence. And silence kept me safe. The shift happened in my early 20s, when I realized saving money wasn't enough. I needed a system. A blueprint. So I created one. I spent nights building algorithms that tracked global shifts, commodity cycles, behavioral patterns in retail investors. I watched trends long before they became headlines. It wasn't luck, it was the art of seeing before the world opened its eyes. No one knew I had built my first trading bot from scratch. No one knew it doubled my income before I turned 25. No one knew I had already quietly exited 3 early-stage companies by 27. Daniel, meanwhile, believed success was measured by how loudly he announced it. He didn't realize real wealth doesn't scream, it whispers. While he bragged about small raises and office gossip, I was quietly negotiating equity stakes in tech infrastructure projects that had the potential to redefine entire markets. I didn't need applause. I needed control. And control came from privacy. Over the years, my system evolved into something larger. Something powerful. Something the financial world would never expect from the girl who once stood invisible in her own home. I built a network, analysts, coders, strategists. Some I hired. Some I partnered with. Some only knew me through encrypted channels where my name was never spoken. Each decision was deliberate. Each investment calculated. Each risk weighed like a surgeon deciding where to cut. And then the compounding began. One correct decision became 10. 10 became 50. Precision turned into momentum. Momentum turned into empire. And empire turned into a number that made even seasoned bankers lose color in their face. $3.8 billion. The kind of number that doesn't just sit in an account. It moves economies. But not a single person in my family knew. Not because I was hiding it out of fear, but because I understood them. If they knew what I had built, I would no longer be Romana. The quiet one, the overlooked one, the girl who needed $100. I would become a threat. A mirror. Proof that everything they believed about me was wrong. So I stayed quiet. I kept my success folded neatly inside encrypted systems, anonymous trusts, and carefully layered legal entities that couldn't be traced back to Romana Fernandez unless I wanted them to be. Even the bank that held one of my main accounts, this particular branch where Daniel mocked me, had no idea who I truly was until I asked for that withdrawal. It's almost funny, in a cruel way, how Daniel's humiliation collided with the truth he never saw coming. His laughter that day wasn't just ignorant, it was the final echo of a lifetime spent underestimating me. And as I stood there in that line, with him smirking behind me, the irony tasted sharper than metal. The girl he mocked for needing $100 was the same woman who could shift global liquidity with one signature. He had no idea whose shadow he was laughing at. Because it wasn't mine anymore. It was his. Daniel was still laughing when I stepped back up to the counter, the sound bouncing off the marble floor like it belonged there. He had a way of turning any space into his stage, and the bank was no exception. People pretended not to watch, but their eyes kept drifting toward us, some wide with discomfort, others soft with pity, the kind reserved for someone you assume is struggling. He leaned against the pillar behind me, arms crossed, smirk carved into his face like it was permanent. "You really came here for $100, Romana," he said loudly, making sure the entire lobby heard. "What happened? Your little side jobs dry up?" His tone had that familiar tilt, mocking, sharp, designed to wound in public. The teller glanced at me with a tiny, apologetic smile. I could see the assumptions running through her eyes. Broke. Embarrassed. Dependent. The girl whose brother announced her failures for her. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard like she wasn't sure whether giving me the cash would help me or humiliate me further. Daniel chuckled behind me. "Honestly, Romana, you should have asked me at home. I would have given it to you, out of pity." He tapped the counter with 2 fingers, impatient. "Come on, tell her you don't have enough in your account. Save her the time." His words sliced cleanly, not because I believed them, but because of how easily he assumed them. How confidently he painted me as small. I kept my expression still, my breathing measured. Years of practice. Years of learning how to fold pain into silence, how to hide power beneath stillness. The fluorescent lights hummed above us, buzzing in sync with the tightness in my jaw. When the teller quietly said, "It's okay, take your time," Daniel laughed again. "Yeah, Romana. Take your time calculating how broke you are." He spoke like my entire identity revolved around his opinion. Like he knew the boundaries of my world. Another customer shifted awkwardly, pretending to read his phone. A security guard glanced over, frowning. Even the bank manager looked up from her office window, concern flickering across her face. But Daniel didn't stop. He never stopped. He stepped closer, lowering his voice just for me. "You know what the saddest part is?" His breath brushed my ear, warm, smug, poisonous. "You always thought you'd become something. And here you are, still needing me, still small." My fingers curled slightly against the counter. Not in anger. In control. In restraint. Because he had no idea how wrong he was. He tapped my shoulder with the back of his hand, a casual little flick that stung more than the impact itself. "Grow up, Romana. You're 30 and begging for $100. It's pathetic." My heart didn't race. It settled. Like a calm before a storm only I could hear. I let the silence breathe between us, heavy and deliberate. Then I turned my head just enough for him to see my profile, my expression unreadable beneath the bright, sterile lights. He expected tears. Or shame. Or another attempt to defend myself. But I only whispered one word. "Okay." His smirk twitched, confused for half a second too late. Because in that tiny moment, everything shifted. Not outside. Not in the room. In me. He just didn't know it yet. Romana Fernandez stepped up to the counter with the quiet confidence of someone who no longer had anything to prove. Daniel Fernandez followed a few steps behind her, arms crossed, wearing that same mocking grin he'd given her. He whispered loudly enough for the staff to hear, "Don't embarrass yourself." Asking for $100 was already enough comedy for the day. She didn't respond. Silence was her sharpest weapon. The bank manager approached. How may we assist you today?" Romana slid her ID forward with steady hands. "I'd like to make a withdrawal." "Of course. How much?" She looked the manager directly in the eyes. $3.8 billion. Full withdrawal. Today. Everything stopped. The keyboard tapping, the printer humming, the casual chatter, it all died in an instant. The manager blinked, thinking he misheard. Daniel let out a loud laugh. "Yeah, right. She probably meant 300. Or 38. Or maybe 38 cents. Romana didn't flinch. "I said what I meant." The manager swallowed hard, trying to regain composure. "Miss Fernandez, I'll need a moment to verify." He hurried away, almost tripping over his own feet. Within seconds, the bank atmosphere shifted. Whispers began spreading like wildfire. "Did she say billion? Is this real? Check the VIP ledger, now." A sudden beep echoed from behind the counters. Then another. Then all at once, alarms. Glass doors locked automatically. Security rushed out from every corner, hands on their earpieces, eyes scanning the room. Daniel's smile hesitated. The manager returned, breath-catching, face pale. "Miss Fernandez, could you please step into the private office?" Romana nodded. She walked calmly, her heels echoing in the silent, tense hall. Daniel followed, no longer amused, confusion tightening his expression. Inside the office, the manager spoke carefully, respectfully for the first time in his life. Your account activity triggered our high-level authorization protocols. To process a withdrawal of this size, we need. I already know the procedures." Her voice remained cold, even. "I built the system you're referring to." The manager froze. Daniel blinked. "You, what?" Romana finally turned to her brother. "When you were laughing this morning, I was finalizing the exit strategy for one of the biggest acquisitions in the country. That $3.8 billion? It's mine. And I'm moving it." Daniel's throat tightened. Outside the glass walls, employees were still whispering. Security waited for instructions. The bank's entire infrastructure had shifted into high alert mode because of one woman Daniel had spent years mocking. The manager cleared his throat nervously. "We're ready to proceed whenever you are, Ms. Fernandez." Romana stood, her posture effortless and commanding. "Good. Let's begin." Daniel didn't say a word. His smile was gone, replaced by the realization that the sister he mocked for asking $100 was the one who could freeze an entire bank with a single request. Daniel Fernandez stood frozen, staring at his sister as if he was seeing her for the first time in his life. Just minutes ago, he had been grinning, enjoying his little moment of superiority. Now? His face twitched, attempting to form a smile that wouldn't come. He cleared his throat. Loudly. "Relax, Romana. I knew you were doing well. I mean, of course you'd have, investments and stuff." Romana Fernandez didn't respond. She simply looked at him with the same calm expression that had shaken the entire bank moments earlier. Daniel tried again, speaking faster, voice cracking slightly. "I mean, come on, 3.8 billion? Yeah, I knew it. I always said you were smart, right? I told Mom that. I told everyone. They'll confirm it." Silence. Romana gave him nothing. No reaction. No correction. No amusement. That silence hit Daniel harder than any insult ever could. He began pacing the tiny office, rubbing his hands together nervously. "I mean, you should have told me. I could have helped you, you know. I'm good with numbers. You didn't have to hide it." The irony stung him the moment the words left his mouth. He remembered all the times he'd mocked her for being a nobody. All the times he joked that she couldn't even afford lunch. All the times he had rejected her calls, ignored her struggles, or laughed at her ideas. Now the only sound in the room was the soft clicking of Romana's pen as she examined the paperwork the manager had given her. Daniel swallowed. The humiliation was sinking deeper by the second. Look, Romana, he said quietly, voice trembling. We're family. Still, she didn't even turn her head. Her silence wasn't cruel. It wasn't revenge. It was worse. It was indifference. Daniel's desperation continued to unravel. He stood behind her chair, trying to force a smile. You know, if you ever, need advice about handling big amounts of money, I can help. Romana finally lifted her gaze. Not to him. To the manager. Continue, she said firmly. Daniel felt himself shrink. He realized that nothing he said could save his dignity, because Romana wasn't fighting him. She wasn't arguing. She wasn't proving anything. She didn't need to. Her silence was the mirror showing him exactly who he had been, and exactly who she had become. The humiliation had officially begun. Just when the tension couldn't tighten any further, the office phone lit up bright red, the color reserved for corporate emergencies. The manager jolted and pressed speaker. A crisp voice came through, authoritative and urgent. Confirm, is Ms. Romana Fernandez on the premises? The manager stuttered, why yes, she's here with us. A pause. Then the entire bank heard it. Prepare for high-level protocol. Ms. Fernandez, please step aside. A senior authority team is en route. Outside the office window, employees began rushing back and forth. Security doubled at every exit. Keypads flashed red. Doors locked again. Someone even pulled down metal shutters around the vault area. It looked like a financial earthquake. Daniel's eyes widened. Wait, why do they need a whole team? For her. The manager didn't answer. He was too busy sweating through his suit. Corporate continued. Do not proceed with any transfer or physical withdrawal until our directors arrive. Repeat, hold all operations. Romana's response was calm, almost bored. I understand. No fear. No confusion. No concern. Just unshakable control. Within minutes, 3 black SUVs pulled up outside the bank, tinted windows, diplomatic plates, armed escorts. People in the lobby pressed against the glass, whispering, who is she? Why are they here? Is she royalty? No, higher. Daniel felt his stomach twist. He had mocked this woman. This woman who casually summoned top-level authorities just by moving her own money. The doors opened, and a group of corporate directors stepped into the bank. Suits, badges, earpieces, the entire elite image. They walked straight past everyone and stopped directly in front of Romana. Ms. Fernandez, the lead director said with a respectful nod, thank you for waiting. We're here to ensure your transaction is handled with full compliance and privacy. Everyone in the lobby heard it. Everyone. Daniel felt the room spin. Rich was one thing. Powerful was another. But untouchable? That was something entirely different. He looked at Romana, who simply nodded back at the directors, completely unfazed. Her calmness made the moment even heavier. Daniel finally whispered, she didn't barely able to breathe. She didn't even glance at Daniel. What are you? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The world already knew. Daniel kept glancing at me as the directors continued preparing the secure transfer, but I didn't look at him. Not yet. I knew this moment would come, the moment when he would finally demand answers he never deserved. Romana, he whispered sharply, why didn't you tell us? Why did you leave the family? Why distance yourself like that? The question wasn't innocent. It was the same question he had thrown at me years ago, dripping with contempt. But this time, he was afraid of the answer. I turned to him slowly. You really don't remember, I said, voice quiet enough to force him to lean in. He blinked, confused. Remember what? The room faded for me. All the noise, the bankers, the security, everything blurred into a distant hum as the memory resurfaced. You sold my research. Daniel's face drained of color instantly. I continued, calm but unflinching. My first financial model. The one I built in university. The one worth millions. You stole it off my laptop while pretending to help me back it up. You forwarded it to your friend, the one who pitched it as his own. Daniel's throat bobbed. I didn't know it was going to be huge. You knew enough to take it, I said. He covered his face with his hands. Romana, that was years ago. You can't. You didn't just betray me, I whispered. You made our parents believe I was lying. They called me jealous, ungrateful, dramatic. And you stood there, Daniel. You stood beside them and let them destroy me. His fingers trembled. I wasn't raising my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was loud enough. That's why I left, I said. Not because I was weak, but because staying would have killed everything inside me that could grow. Daniel stared at me, stunned, speechless. And the reason this hurts you now, I added, is because you finally realize I didn't disappear. I evolved. His breathing turned shallow. And you, I said, stayed exactly the same. The moment cracked something in him. I saw it. And that was only the beginning. Daniel stood there, shaking. Not angry. Not proud. Just broken. He reached for my arm, but I stepped back without touching him. He froze like I'd slapped him. Romana, he whispered, voice cracking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't think you'd make something of it. I didn't know it mattered that much. He was unraveling. He tried to laugh, the sound weak and warped. Come on, we're family. You know how things were. I was stupid. You were different. I didn't mean to hurt you, okay? I didn't know you would become this. His eyes glistened. Real or fake, I couldn't tell. It didn't matter. For the first time in my life, Daniel looked small. Like a child caught lying, stripped of the spotlight he always assumed was his birthright. Tell me what to do, he begged quietly. Tell me how to fix this. I'll do anything. Just don't look at me like that. I didn't realize until that moment how powerful silence could be. How deeply it could slice when directed at someone who had always been loud, dominant, untouchable. He was trembling, voice thin as thread. I didn't think you'd ever rise above us, he whispered. I finally looked him in the eyes, steady, composed, untrembling. That's the problem, I said softly. You never thought. His entire posture collapsed. The power had shifted, fully, permanently, and he knew he would never get it back. The lead director returned, holding a secure tablet. Ms. Fernandez, the full $3.8 billion is ready. How would you like to proceed? The entire bank held its breath. Daniel looked at me like he was waiting for his sentence. I reviewed the digital form one last time, then signed with a precise swipe of my finger. Transfer it, I said. Move everything. The directors nodded immediately. Yes, A low electronic chime echoed through the bank, confirmation. Every screen on the floor flashed green for a moment. Every locked door clicked open. Every staff member released the breath they were holding. The entire bank obeyed. I stood, smoothing my coat, and headed toward the exit. The moment the doors unlocked, they parted for me automatically, an image so symbolic it almost made me laugh. Daniel stumbled after me. Romana, please, just listen. I stopped, turned slightly, and let him see the final version of me he had created. The one who no longer needed his validation, his approval, or his presence. Funny, I said quietly, how you mock me for asking $100. I looked him over, the panic in his eyes, the humiliation dripping off him, the years of arrogance finally collapsing. When you never realized I was the one holding the whole bank in my hands. I walked past him without another word. And for the first time in his life, Daniel didn't follow. He stayed behind, drowning in the silence he once used to control me.